Joining me now is Trevor Loudon. Breitbart has a series, the CCP's United Front Hub in America's Heartland. There's 3 parts to it. Let's talk. I asked Trevor if he would read this series, get into it, and explain it to us. Trevor, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Brandon.
Tell me about this CCP, Chinese Communist Party, United Front Network in America. Tell me about it, please. What's the article exposing? 3-part series?
Well, the article is focusing on the Minnesota wing of it. You know, this anywhere there's a Chinese diaspora, the United Front operates, you know, especially in San Francisco, New York, Boston, etc. But Minnesota is the heartland. The Chinese seems to have focused on Minnesota for some time because it's always been a left-wing controlled area right back since the early 1920s. And they also have a lot of communist groups there like Freedom Road Socialist Organization and Democratic Socialists of America. And it's a big farming area as well, which is important to the Chinese, and it's quite a cultural center. So the United Front is a series of organizations, China Friendship Societies, diaspora organizations, associations of overseas Chinese, etc. And they work directly for the Chinese government, the United Front Department, which is a wing of the CCP, which uses cultural, economic, political, media power to influence foreign governments and societies in ways that suit the CCP. So it's a propaganda operation, but also part of it is a policing operation because they have an actual Chinese police station in Minnesota, so-called, which is answers to the Chinese police and monitors local Chinese to make sure they stay loyal and don't go off script, you know, to make sure that community is under control, much like the mafia used to lord it over the Italian communities in some big cities. This CCP operation controls the local Chinese population and several of the Democratic Party operatives in that state, and some Republicans too.
It says here, the Breitbart article says, there's arguably more smoke in Minnesota than there was in New York City when the FBI's investigation of that police station was started. So in other words, apparently Minnesota's further down the road to not only Islamization, of course, let's not forget about their congresswoman, right? Ilhan Omar from there.
Yep.
Somalia, they've changed their flag in Minnesota, look like the Somali flag. They're not only being taken over by the Islamists, but now they're further down the road when it comes to the CCP than New York, apparently, according to this report.
Well, that goes together. You know,
yes.
The Chinese enable, it's the communist parties that bring in the Islamists. That's deliberate policy. And you'll find that all around the world. And Minnesota is a bedrock of Maoism. You know, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization is based there. They're the people who started the George Floyd riots and are running the anti-ICE riots right now, both of which are very much supported by the Chinese. So I'm not surprised that Minnesota has been a very strong base for the Chinese United Front, because that left-wing base is already there, big Islamic population, and it's just very centrally located, and it's a cultural center. It's one of the main cultural centers in the Midwest, and a lot of the United Front stuff is done by even, you know, touring artistic shows and ballets and cultural shows. The Chinese rightly regard cultural influence as very, very important in subverting a country.
Well, they talk about, here, I'll go back to the top of the page. They say in their article, part 1 of this joint investigation, Breitbart News Foundation and the Government Accountability Institute, it was revealed that from a single brick building on North Eustis Street in St. Paul, Minnesota, a web of pro-Beijing nonprofits and businesses collaborate with overseas Chinese Service Center of Minnesota, which itself works directly with the Chinese Communist Party's United Front Work Department. Part 2 revealed that the Public University of Minnesota email account of a Dr. Bingwen Yan, the person in charge of the Minnesota OCSC, is listed on official Chinese Communist Party websites as the official contact for the Minnesota OCSC, and that any communications that may have been taking place on that email address could prove useful to any investigation of whether CCP is operating another so-called police station in Minnesota. Now, in part 3, BNF and GAI turn their focus on another Chinese-born businessman with connections to this network in St. Paul. They mention who he is. Well, it looks like the CCP is clearly taking over Minnesota, but don't we know that already? Don't you believe their governor, Walz, is an agent of the CCP? That's my question. I don't have any proof to that, but didn't he travel over there? Isn't there enough smoke to say he could be an actual agent of the CCP, Walz?
Oh, look, absolutely. I think this the overwhelming case, and he is involved with these United Front organizations. Mm-hmm. He goes to their functions. He supports their causes. They support his causes. They donate to his policies. And it's not just him. It's some of the other, Minnesota is run by the old Wellstone machine. It's Tim Walz. It's Peggy Flanagan, who's now running for the U.S. Senate from Minnesota. She was trained by the Wellstone organization, which was a communist group. Keith Ellison, who's the Attorney General, was also trained by Wellstone. So you got this Marxist network. But Tim Walz, and we wrote about that extensively in my book, Stealth, Kamala Harris's Communist Roots. Did a whole chapter on Tim Walz and his ties to the Chinese. He's been over there about 30 times. He would take young Minnesota high school students over there to meet, to have, in delegations to meet with Chinese people, but they weren't allowed to talk about America. They weren't allowed to talk about how great America was, only to learn from the Chinese. And these things were funded by the Chinese government. His business, and he ran this as a business, had contracts with the Chinese government. He was effectively an unregistered agent of the Chinese Communist Party who later ran for vice president. But, there's nothing to see here, right? No, absolutely. If Tim Walz is not a Chinese agent, I don't know how you would define one.
Now, tell me what's going on. We need to get Gordon Chang back on. But tell me what's going on this week with Xi Jinping. There's a big meeting being held right now in China. Is he going to hold on to power? What's going to happen to Xi Jinping?
Look, I don't know, but the military, the Chinese military is preparing for war. And there will be elements in China who don't think they're quite ready for war, but the military seems hell-bent on it. And it seems to me that the military is exerting its power and Xi Jinping's role is coming to an end. And I do not think for a moment that Xi Jinping is really the leader of China. He is appointed by the CCP, is answerable to the CCP, just as Vladimir Putin is not really the leader of Russia. He is the tool of the Soloviki, the intelligence state, the KGB state, the old Communist Party networks. So no, I think he's being phased out because he's a civilian leader, getting his health is suffering, his prestige is suffering. He's not the man to lead China in a war. Well,
here we go. Inconvenient Truths by Jennifer Zeng. Just completed verification. All commanders and political commissioners of the People's Liberation Army, Navy, Rocket Force, and the 5 theater commands have been removed from their posts. Some have been prosecuted. Some are under investigation. Others have been dismissed. Not a single one has been spared. This information comes from Yo Qing, a former staff officer, lieutenant colonel at the headquarters of the PLA Navy, living in the U.S. now. I was way ahead of the official news again, and rumors turned out to be true again. 7 months after I first broke the news, of He Wingdong's arrest today. The CCP finally announced it. So something's going on in China, and Gordon Chang is talking about the fact that the big station over there, CCTV's failure to report the Defense Ministry's Friday announcement of the removal of 9 officers who were Xi Jinping's loyalists is extremely strange. This, I guess, means the broadcaster is in Xi's camp. Sure, stay tuned for news, rumors, speculation, and analysis. You just said something interesting. You don't think Xi Jinping is the guy they need to be in charge when they go to war. Is that what I just heard you say, Trevor?
Yeah, well, exactly. He's not a military guy, and they have removed all his military people, meaning people loyal to him. So who is doing that? I would surmise that it is the more militant military wing of the CCP, which is getting ready for war. And so they don't want softies like Xi Jinping in power, a civilian leader. They want a general or someone who's much closer to the military, and they want military people who aren't tainted by Xi Jinping's rule, which is, Xi Jinping has mainly been an economic guy and a subversion guy. He hasn't been a war man, a warrior, and the Chinese will want someone who's more suited to that. So, I think we could quite soon see Xi Jinping go, and that will be the sign that hostilities are in the offing, I think.
America's supply chain. Peter Navarro has been warning that America's supply chain runs right through China's ports. So how can we deal with China when our supply chain and our drugs and so much more are dependent on China? Trevor?
Well, that's the thing. That's why China recently cut off the supply of rare earth minerals to the United States. And where do they get rare earth minerals from? Well, a lot of them come from Afghanistan, which Joe Biden gave to China effectively. We have a big problem there, which Trump and Hegseth and others have been doing their best to mitigate that, to bring, chip manufacturing back to the United States, for instance, because we depend too much on South Korea and Taiwan for our computer chips, but also rare earth minerals are being actively explored now in the United States and Wyoming and other places, because they can see, it's like getting to war with Hitler and putting in an order for German steel for your tanks or your planes. Well, you're not going to get it, are you? So the administration is very wise to be looking for other ways of getting rare earth minerals, domestic ways, because they know that China is intent on war. And China's not going to be supplying us rare earth minerals or technologies or drugs, except for illegal fatal drugs, or anything else that we might need. So and then this is a big part of Trump's tariff proposals, to try and get as much of what we need, from steel to pharmaceuticals, manufactured at home, because he can see that the hot wars are coming.
The hot wars are coming. We've been warning about Yasser Qadi, the imam who had a mosque down the road from me, who's now in Texas building a 402-acre compound. We've been warning about him for years. Very few people even wanted to pay attention. Many so-called Bible teachers and their staff were defending James White, who did an interfaith dialogue with him right in our backyard. But again, like most evangelicals and most people in America, they don't pay attention to something until they think it's going to impact them personally, which means they wait till it's too late. So now all of a sudden, there's all this talk for the last year plus about Yasser Qadi. We're like, we tried telling you about this character in 2008.
Driven largely by Amy Meck and the foundation. You have to give her full credit for that.
Yeah. Although we were talking about him long before her, but yes, she has.
I know. But
we were on this dude back in 2007, 2008. But yes, she's now joined. She has. Which, by the way, we've invited her on the broadcast several times, but I don't think she texts me back. I don't think she does a lot of interviews. But we'd love to put her on the show, put her on the network, interview her. But we're glad she picked it up. But she's one of the few, because we've been talking about that character forever. And I bring that up to say that there's another one we've been talking about for years. Siraj Wahhaj. This guy was brought to the mosque down the road from where we're sitting right now by Yasser Qadi. Yasser Qadi brought Siraj Wahhaj to his compound in Plano. Now, over the weekend, the internet is exploding with everybody wanting to talk about Siraj Wahhaj. Well, that's nice. But again, why are Americans always so far behind? And why has he come back up? Because the guy running for mayor of New York, Mandani, is palling around with Siraj Wahhaj, who is an unindicted co-conspirator in the bombing of the World Trade Center. And you guys might remember a few years ago where some Islamic dude was training young jihadis in the deserts of the Southwest. That's Siraj Wahhaj's son. Okay? So Fox News is talking about this now, finally. A lot of others are talking about it. But again, they're talking about it too late. Siraj Wahhaj is perhaps the most well-known imam in America. Here he is. Here's a clip of him. I've played this many times. Here he is back in 1991.
You don't get embarrassed because it's the American Facebook. You get embarrassed in politics because politics can be a weapon to use to aid the cause of Islam. It is an honor to die jihad. Yes, it's an honor.
I want to defend this country. You know what this country is? It's a garbage can. It's filthy. It's filthy and sick.
Every day they would go to school and they put an American flag in front of these little babies, Muslim babies. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
That's Siraj Wahhaj. You know, he's running around with Mandani, who's running for mayor, an Islamist and a Marxist. Trevor?
Well, you're right, Brandon. You've been calling attention to this for some time. This Islam is not, well, a friend said this, you know, Islam is a political system masquerading as a religion. It is political, very political. It is modeled, the Muslim Brotherhood was started by the Egyptian Communist Party back in the 1920s. So it works on a communist cell structure and it infiltrates, and it never says what it really intends to do. Its goal is power and domination. Nihad Awad, the head of CAIR, has got a new plan out right now, plan to train up 100,000 people by 2050 to penetrate the law and politics and academia.
Can I stop you right there, because you had no idea where I was going, but I had that already queued up. The head of CAIR, which is tied back to Hamas. I mean, Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 1928 in Egypt. Hamas founded in 1987. CAIR founded in 1994, I think it was. Okay, their groups are all connected and tied. You agree?
Yes, absolutely. CAIR is basically the front for Hamas in America, and Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood.
And
very, very tied together.
And Amy Meat brings out a video where the head of CAIR, who has said Black Lives Matter is our matter, Black Lives Matter is our campaign too, the red-green axis. They're going to train up, according to this video I'm going to play, they're trying to train up 100,000 journalists, 100,000 filmmakers, 100,000 lawyers and policy operatives. Do you know what that means, 100,000 lawyers, folks? That means what they plan to do is to bring lawsuits, I think, against groups like mine to keep us tied up in court and defund us. I am already told by credible sources that the IRGC has already declared a fatwa financially on my organization. Did you know that? We found out about a year ago.
I didn't, but that doesn't surprise me in the least.
They've declared a fatwa on our organization, wanting to try to get us involved in a situation where we can't financially continue. So 100,000 journalists, 100,000 filmmakers, 100,000 lawyers, and 100,000 potential candidates, okay? And let's remember now, back in 2017, now we've been covering Islam a long time here too, folks, so is Trevor. But back in 2017, we really went pedal to the metal, because in 2017, we had a gunman from Saudi Arabia come into our conference in Sioux Falls. He did 7 months in federal prison for that. We then exposed James White having his interfaith dialogue here in town with Yasser Qadi, who's now in Plano, who's hanging around with Siraj Wahhaj, who we just played. Now people want to talk about Siraj Wahhaj and Yasser Qadi years and years later. But guess who was our opposition when we were trying to talk about all that in 2017? Our opposition with Phil Johnson, the executive director of Grace Church, of Grace to You, John MacArthur's ministry. And John and I knew each other, and we would email, and I told John, get your tack dog under control. He's barking up the wrong tree. John refused to do it. So evangelical Christians, you were thrown to the dogs, I believe. I believe you were thrown to the dogs by these hyper-Calvinists, okay? And John MacArthur refused to get Phil under control. Justin Peters, that little guy who we were so nice to, gave him a show, promoted him, mostly because we felt sorry for him, which was stupid on my part after the fact. He's on video saying Islam is not a threat to the church in America. And yet, my friends, what you're going to find out is when you get these 100,000 lawyers and journalists and filmmakers, they're going to start prosecuting hate crime laws, everything they can to shut down churches left and right, and radio, Christian radio, freedom of speech. And you'll have no one to blame but your hyper-Calvinists who, instead of joining us in 2017, warning about Yasser Qadi and Siraj Wahhaj, attacked us, put out on social media where I went to church, so I had to leave that church, doxed my home address. As I said in my book, A Religious Trojan Horse in 2011, the greatest threat to America are the false Christians, the false dominant church that's rising. That's the greatest threat to America. Because if there was a real church that wasn't infiltrated by a false church, we could solve a lot of these problems. We are some of the best writers, researchers, speakers, preachers, teachers, broadcasters. We have skills in this area for decades. The evangelical world has, but the evangelical world was infiltrated by false teachers and men who have risen from within to draw away the disciples after themselves. Would you agree with any of this, Trevor?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of it, Brandon. And I'm not a theology expert, but I do know that the left has heavily penetrated the churches. So you've got two kinds of problems in the churches. One is outright left-wing penetration, actual Marxists getting inside the church, pretending to be Christians, and others, the very naive wing of the church, who misunderstands the concept of love to confuse it with being nice to everybody. Well, love isn't being nice to everybody all the time. Sometimes when you love your child, you got to spank them. You got to call people to account. And if you have a religion in this country, look, when I came to America, I had to swear that I'd never been involved in any communist or socialist organization or Nazi organization that sought to overthrow or undermine the US Constitution. But if you're a Sharia-compliant Muslim, you know, you believe in Sharia law, you believe that is God's supreme law and everybody on earth must conform to it, that supersedes the US Constitution, of course. You are at odds with the US Constitution. If Islam was purely political and didn't have a religious veneer, Muslims wouldn't be allowed in this country, just like communists and Nazis wouldn't be, because they're all cut from the same cloth. It's only the fact that Islam has a religious veneer and is therefore people think it's protected by the First Amendment, that they're able to do this. If Islam is treated purely as a political organization, which I believe is the main problem with it, you wouldn't be allowed in the country if you're a practicing Muslim, because you are here to overthrow and undermine the US Constitution. And if you don't think that's a threat to the Christian church or Americans' liberties, you are beyond naive, or you are complicit, one of the two, because it is absolutely a threat to both.
And so while the so-called church in America has been infiltrated by hyper-Calvinist, replacement theology, and all the other things we can go to the line, the Islamists are gaining steam. as the so-called evangelicals have been taught by people like James White and others, and defended by Phil Johnson of John MacArthur's Grace to You, apparently, that evangelism is interfaith dialogue. Even though Syed Khatib of the Muslim Brotherhood said interfaith dialogue is a one-way bridge to bring the non-Muslim to our side, not the other way around. So while the rug is being pulled out from underneath real Christians by leaders that should have never gotten where they are, if we actually had people who were discerning, they would have never gotten where they are, because you would have identified their false theology as just that, and you wouldn't have let them print their books, publish their books with any reputable group, or promoted them. But people aren't discerning, so these guys get false teachers, and these guys get a following, and then they use the following, guess what, to undermine the real church. And now, while that's all been going on, here you have CAIR saying we're going to develop 100,000 journalists, 100,000 lawyers, 100,000 filmmakers, and 100,000 candidates. I mean,
yeah, that's like saying the Communist Party or a fascist group says we're going to get 100,000 fascists, we're going to get 100,000 communists, which they have actually already. But this is very explicit. They are not here to learn from our society. Look, a Sharia-compliant Muslim believes the whole world belongs to Allah. And anybody who's not a Muslim is a trespasser. So the world, they're not invading us, they're just taking it back for Allah. That's their duty to do it. Now, how do we think this is not going to impact us in the future? You see any country, look, put it this way. When's the last time you had a Muslim missionary knock on your door? Say, come down to the mosque, hear about Allah. Almost all of Islam, almost the entire Islamic world has become that way through either demographics or military invasion. There's very, very limited examples of Muslim proselytization. It's all been by military force and conquest. So Islam is not the same as Hinduism or Sikhism or Mormonism or, any other religion on the planet, because it's primarily political and a religion of conquest. And so therefore, it should be treated as primarily as a political organization, not as a religious organization. And if it was treated as a political organization, which it absolutely is, by any standard, practicing Muslims would not be allowed to enter this country on a permanent basis.
And now here is CAIR talking about, just a few minutes of CAIR talking about their goal to build up these 100,000 lawyers, 100,000 journalists, 100,000 filmmakers, 100,000 candidates to implement Islam. Why?
The tide is shifting and there is a vacuum. How the Muslim community is going to fill this? And you say, is this khutbah about politics? No. This khutbah is about the ummah affairs. This khutbah is about our future. This khutbah is about akhirah. This khutbah is about what to do next. We have been blessed, and here's the action plan. Brothers and sisters, we have 4,000 mosques in the country. 4,000 mosques. If each mosque establishes a small fund for scholarship to give scholarships for 5 students in the following areas. 1, for journalism, to tell our story. Another one for filmmaking, to influence the culture, to be fair. Third, to defend our rights and the rights of other people. Fourth, political science, to engage in policy making effectively and scientifically. And fifth, scholarship for history, to preserve the truth, because history is important. If our mosques continue on this path and start in 2026, forget about 25, 5 years from now, we will have 4,000 journalists, 4,000 filmmakers, 4,000 lawyers, 4,000 political scientists and analysts, and 4,000 students of history that can be teachers of history. In 12 years, if we are consistent, the Muslim community will have 50,000 of each. In the year 2050, imagine, the Muslim community will have 100,000 of each. Then we will tell our own story. We will defend the people who are oppressed. And many of those people who studied law, most likely they can run for public office at all levels of government in our society. Those are areas that the Muslim community has not paid attention to. And moving forward, the Muslim community needs to pay attention and build political power.
Build political power. There you have it. They have a plan.
Yeah, I didn't
it.
see him talking about. I didn't see him talking about bring people to Allah. I didn't see him talking about bring people to the Muslim faith. It's about political power. Like Nihad Awad, before he became a Hamas supporter, and he's an open Hamas supporter, was a leader of the General Union of Palestinian Youth in America, which is affiliated to the Soviet Front World Federation of Democratic Youth. He was a Communist Front activist before he became an Islamic activist. And he still talks exactly like a Communist Front activist today because that's what he is. CAIR is a Communist Front. And this proves my point. We're dealing with a political phenomenon, not primarily a religious phenomenon. It's a political phenomenon with a religious veneer.
And what will happen will be what's now going on in Nigeria, where we have Christians being slaughtered. We have one lady whose husband was murdered in front of her. Her child, who's 3, was murdered in front of her. And her 10-month-old child was slaughtered in front of her, and she had her hand chopped off. What's going on in Nigeria, folks, is coming to America unless we wake up. And I'm not going to say unless the churches wake up, because most of what we have that are called churches are not churches, okay? Those are social clubs, okay? Those are places where people go to get some pop culture, get some pop psychology, have some, thumping music with a light system and smoke machine and a coffee and go home. We are the church, okay? We're the church. But if you sit around and wait for your local church to do anything, they're not going to do anything. We've been holding Worldview Weekend since 1993. And back then we had a lot of them working with us. And then the churches were taken over with a purpose-driven model of Rick Warren and others, Peter Drucker, which was, there are all kinds of customers out there. Why isn't your church bigger? Because you're not catering to all the customers. Find out what your customers want. Who are the customers? Everybody in your society. So take a survey of what people want and give them that kind of church. And guess what? The average community church that's been driven by what the world wants is not going to talk about Islam and contrast it to a biblical worldview. They don't even want to talk about the Bible unless it's ripped and twisted to make them feel good and appease them and tickle their ears. So what is happening in Nigeria, I can promise you it's coming to America if we stay on this trajectory. Do you disagree with that, Trevor?
Look, I 100% agree. Look, my good friend Jad Saul is one of the key activists in this country, advocating on the behalf of Nigerian Christians who are being slaughtered at a horrible rate right now. And he's working, trying to get the Trump administration to do something about this, to put pressure on the Nigerian government. But yeah, look, there has been no country that I'm aware of that was taken over by Islam or become to be dominated by Islam without considerable violence. I don't, look, if I'm not a historian, I'm not Nihad Awad, I don't know all the history, but in modern, I don't know any that haven't been taken over with violence and having violence perpetrated on their non-Muslim populations afterwards, whether they be Hindu or Buddhist or Christian or Sikh or Jain or whatever. There is a history of Muslims subjugating and forcibly converting and often murdering those they conquer.
Well, and
so why would it be different here?
Yeah, why would it be different
If you're
here?
not going to bend the knee to Islam, how are you going to function in an Islamic dominated society?
And here's this poor Nigerian woman whose husband was murdered by the Islamists, her 10-year-old, her 3-month-old, and her hand chopped off. You guys pray for her tonight. Add her to your prayer list and all those Nigerians. Can you imagine having your husband, your wife murdered in front of you, raped in front of you, then murdered? Your 10-year-old, your 3-month-old murdered in front of you? It was her 3-year-old, excuse me, and her 10-month-old. I just, and largely the media is silent on this. Where are the protests for the Christians in Nigeria in the streets of America? Where are the newscasts? This is largely unheard. This is so underreported in the U.S., Trevor.
Because Christians are the one religious group that are not allowed to be victims, according to the media. You cannot report on instances where Christians are being victimized. If Muslims are being victimized, anyone else is being victimized, that's sort of okay, but not Christians, because Christians, they have it coming because they've been dominating the earth and imposing their terrible civilization on other nations for 1,000 years. And it's about time they got what's coming to them. That's the attitude of the left. And most journalists have some degree of that attitude going on.
Yep. All right. We've got a lot to do, Trevor. We've got to teach people what Islam is. We've got to teach them what Marxism is. We've got to teach them how these worldviews are working together. We've got to teach them how. I just got an email or a text from a gal who is an expert on Islam, and she just watched one of our programs on how hyper-Calvinists are promoting replacement theology and really breeding anti-Semitism. And she said, how did this ever come in to Calvinism? And I said, stand by, I'll call you and give you a briefing. This came from John Calvin. Sadly, it came from Martin Luther. You know, these people were anti-Semitic, and it's bred its way, and now it's mainstream into the church, the replacement theology. God's done with the Jews. He's done with Israel, doesn't need to deal with the Jews anymore. That's now gives a, basically this attitude of so what that Islam's rising. And they've been taught that Islam is just misunderstood, that most Muslims are peaceful. When reality is there's only one Islam. There's not a moderate, there's not a radical, there's one Islam. It includes the murder of the Christians and the Jews, kill the people, the Saturday people going to synagogue, kill the Sunday people, the people going to church. And, the Bible says my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, acquisition of truth about the Bible, of course. But the Bible tells us to know these things, to understand the times and know how to respond. And yet, that's why we started Worldview Weekend conferences and did them over 300 locations around the country, because the average American doesn't understand the various worldviews, Islam, communism, postmodernism. I could name the rest that are not only here, but now have merged. And if we don't teach more people what's coming, this is going to be a horrific situation for our country and my children, my grandchildren.
Yeah, well, exactly right, Brandon, because as you say, Christianity has been so dumbed down in this country and so commercialized and so lowest common denominator that it won't even call out evil in its own flock, let alone evil elsewhere. You'll go to a lot of churches before you'll even hear the word evil muttered. or even said. It's all about love, and we must focus on love and never on evil. Well, there's two, if you believe in love, you got to believe in evil. If you believe in God, you got to believe in Satan. If you believe in good, you have to believe in evil. You can't have one without the other. Good will eventually dominate, but we cannot have good triumphing if you ignore evil. I was talking to Judd about his work in Nigeria, Judd Saul, and he's lobbying right today. And he says he goes to a village, and there'll be a lot of the villages were mixed. There would be Christians and Muslims would live side by side, and they'd live that way for 50 years. Then one day they'd get a call, the Muslims will get a call, and they go around slaughtering all the Christians. Because they are answerable to the imam. They're answerable to the hierarchy of Islam. And if they do not obey that, they might be the ones being slaughtered. Islam is not a religion of love. It's a religion of submission. And you must submit at every level to those above you. That's exactly the opposite of the American system. Mm-hmm. That's the exact opposite of Christianity. Christianity believes you have a direct relationship with God, not with your county sheriff or mayor or congressman or senator. God is who you answer to, not the civil authorities ultimately. But in Islam, you answer to the hierarchy because it's very hierarchical. And the top Muslims, they answer to Allah. And it happens to be that Allah always agrees with what the mullahs want, or what the emir wants. It's like the old, divine right of kings years ago in Europe. The king spoke to God and he told people what to do. And God always agreed with what the king wanted. It's very convenient that way. Well, that's how Islam is today. Islam has never been through a reformation. It is still the same theologically as it was in the 7th century when Muhammad went around slaughtering every tribe in the vicinity and exacting tribute from them. He started his religion by killing everybody he could and subjugating people. And that philosophy has never been disavowed. There's never been a reformation to say that that's not okay. That's not how we do things now. And it is still how things are done. It's being done in Nigeria because they can. It's been done in the Middle East because they can. And when they can, they will do it here too.
That's exactly right. When they can, they'll do it here as well. All I can tell you, folks, get armed, because they are planning on October 7th here. And already we see that we've been sending $40 million a week to the Taliban. And Congressman Tim Burchett's trying to stop it. Others are trying to stop it. $40 million a week have been going to the Taliban. And they're trying to it's passed the House. It's now stalled in the Senate to turn this off. We're funding our own slaughter and murder. And they're gonna carry out an October 7th event here, folks. And I don't know where they're gonna do it, but if it's your town, you better be armed and you better be ready to hunker down and defend your family, because your local officials will not be able to help everyone. My local officials didn't even know who the imam was down the road when I told them back in 2017. I asked some of them, do you know who this guy is? No. Do you know he's barred from going into parts of Europe? No. You know who Siraj Wahhaj is? No. He's an unindicted co-conspirator of the bombing of the World Trade Center. He just spoke at the mosque down the street. Huh. There was zero curiosity, Trevor.
Well, that's the thing, the police in the big cities in America used to have police intelligence squads, and they would monitor radicals, terrorists, extremists. They were all abolished in the 70s under pressure from the communists. The communists got all of that protection abolished. The only big city, I believe, that now has a police intelligence department is New York. And I think at Mandami will probably abolish that too. And I think that intelligence department is the only reason we haven't had another 9/11 up till now. And if they abolish that department, I wonder what will happen then.
Here it is, trevorloudon.com, trevorloudon.com, and you'll find all of his books. Book him to speak for you. It's all there. trevorloudon.com, trevorloudon.com. How long have we been working together, Trevor? What's it been, 15, 20 years yet?
Probably 15. First interviews were probably about 2011, 2012, something like that. You know, not quite sure. It's been a while.
Wow. Well,
but you've always you haven't altered your stance, have you? You haven't moved. You haven't changed your views with the times. Have you, Brandon?
neither have you. We're both just two intolerant fuddy-duddies stuck in the mud and not moving.
That's right. But we can both sleep at night, can we not?
That's absolutely we can. Yes, I can. trevorloudon.com. Thank you, Trevor.
It was a pleasure, Brandon.
You too. Check out
thanks to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out his books. Get his books. He's got so many great books over there. So much history at trevorloudon.com. We'll be right back after this break.
True beauty isn't applied. It's nourished from within. Bella Grace Elixir, a luxurious, scientifically crafted blend designed to restore radiance, vitality, and strength at a cellular level. At the heart of Bella Grace Elixir lies cat's claw, a powerful herb from the Amazon known for its ability to control inflammation and protect collagen. With Verisol collagen peptides, it goes beyond the surface, stimulating your body's natural collagen production to reduce fine lines, improve skin elasticity, and promote real, visible change. Bella Grace Elixir doesn't stop at collagen. It includes astaxanthin, one of nature's most powerful antioxidants. 6,000 times stronger than vitamin C, astaxanthin protects your skin from harmful UV rays and environmental stress, while locking in hydration and promoting a radiant, youthful glow. Experience the power of nature with Bella Grace Elixir at melissahousebg.com. Discover the science behind Bella Grace Elixir at melissahousebg.com. Read powerful testimonials from doctors and real customers who've experienced life-changing results, and explore other wellness products from Bella Grace. Bella Grace Elixir is more than just a product. It's a solution. Visit melissahousebg.com today.